This is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. This tutorial is a new technique for me that I saw on YouTube done by Kirsty Partridge. She is a color pencil artist who does beautiful works, and this is a technique she shared for her art to make the pencil drawing look closer to a painting. I don't do color pencil art, but I thought it might work in my stamping project, so I gave it a try. So let's give it a go. Let's start out by looking at the supplies that I'll be using today. We are going to use a smooth watercolor paper. I have cut this piece to be 4 3/4 by 3.5 inches. I use the Artist Loft watercolor paper today, but any watercolor paper should work just fine for this project. I then cut out a piece of cardstock for a frame. This is cut to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And then for our card base, I took some cardstock and I just took an 8.5 by 11 sheet, cut it in half, and then I folded that in half as well. You will need to have some color pencils, and I also again happen to have Artist Loft. You can use anything that you like. Probably a more expensive brand may give you a different finish, a nicer finish than these, but this actually did a really nice job for this project for me. You will need to have some rubbing alcohol, and I have this one, and it's I use a 99% alcohol percentage. This is the same as what I use when I'm doing my alcohol inks. Today we will be using Lupin, the Lavinia stamp, for our design. He's going to be the only stamp that we will use. I have the number down below this video so you can see it, and we'll also link to it to purchase it from Bello's Designs. You'll also want to have a very light color of a water-based ink. I have chosen Pumice Stone to use, and basically what we're going to use that for is just to get a very, very light impression of our stamp. I'll show you about that as we go along. And in order to get that stamped onto my card, I will be using my stamping platform. Also, as we are working with the alcohol for this project, we want to go ahead and just tape our card down to the work surface, since it will be getting a little bit wet, and I've used the Sweet Poppy low tack tape for doing that. You'll want to have a paintbrush. You can also use cotton buds if you'd like to. I like this brush because I can cover a wide area, or the tip allows me to do a smaller area when I'm applying the alcohol. Also, the way I like to finish my project out is to do some black ink around it and to give it some shadows and details. So with that, I have just used a very fine tip black ink pen. You need to have some paper towels on hand or rag. This is what you can use to dry your brush off while you're doing the alcohol process. And then when you're ready to put your card together, I will use this adhesive running tape. You can also use a paper glue. Alright, so let's start working on our project. So let's start out by looking at this picture here, and with this picture that I'm getting ready to show you, it shows you what it looks like after I've finished coloring with the color pencils, and then what it looks like when I have actually put the alcohol on top of the project. And you can see the difference that it makes between what the pencil drawing looks like and what the final project will begin to look like. So now we're going to take our piece of watercolor cardstock, called watercolor paper, and we're going to put it on our stamping platform, or you can actually just use an acrylic block if you prefer to do that. You're not needing to worry too much about precision or the way it looks as far as looking like a finished stamped image. So we're going to take our Lupin stamp, and that one is LAV 774, and we are going to just position him in the middle of our card. And then I'm going to stamp him with that very, very light ink. And you may not even be able to see it very well. And that's kind of the point. You don't want to use your VersaFine Clair ink or something that's along those lines, because I tested it out, and when you put the alcohol on top of it, then what's going to happen is that that ink is going to smear. So we'll start out by just taking this very, very light Pumice Stone and seeing if we can just get an impression of the image, just enough to see it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. And I think that that image is probably dark enough for me to see, but as you can see, it's very, very light. So we will remove that and the stamp off of our stamping platform, and now we can just put this stamping platform aside. Now what I did, so that I could see it when I'm actually doing my outlines, doing my coloring, is I took a very, you can either use brown or you can use black, whichever, and just very, very lightly, just go ahead and outline your stamp. This is nothing detailed. This is just something to help you to be able to see where your design is. If you feel like you can see it well enough so when you start doing your coloring with your color pencil, then that's fine. You don't need to worry about doing this part. But this just helps me to just be able to see it just a little bit better. So I'll go ahead and speed up the video here so you don't have to watch me finish drawing this out. Okay, so now we have got this drawn out, and this is where we're going to start coloring. Now I went ahead and got several shades of brown out, and then I got the green that I'm going to do for a little bit of his eye, and pink for in the ear and the nose. I'm going to start out with my very lightest color of brown, and what you're going to do is you're going to color this light layer over the entire surface of him. Now what you're going to want to do, you don't need to press real hard, but you do need to do several layers. So once you get him completely colored over, then you're going to go ahead and go back in and color again, going a different direction. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try and add on 2 or 3 layers of color. The more layers of color that you have, the better this process, this technique will work. So as you can see, I'm just coloring it in. And then as I did up here on the top, I started going a different direction. You can see where it's getting darker. And basically what you're trying to do is get as little of the white of the paper to keep it from showing, and getting a lot of color layered on top of each other. So I'm going to stop the camera here and finish out doing this light color, and then we'll come back in and I'll show you what I'm going to be doing on the to give it a little bit more shading and layers. Okay, so what I did was I basically just went over the entire surface of him with my light brown pencil, and I went ahead and did 3 layers. So I did the first layer going in this direction as I colored. And then the second layer, I went in the opposite direction. And the third layer, I went back to doing this, or I let myself do it sideways. Just anything that will get as much of the surface as you possibly can covered up with this pencil. And from what Kirsty had said in her video was the more layers you have, then the brighter the look is going to be when you add your alcohol. So now we're ready to go ahead and just add some shading into him. So just pick out some other shades of browns and just go into different places where shading is normally seen. Now, one of the nice things about the Lavinia stamps here is that it kind of shows you some areas of shading on the stamp. So if you want to have that set aside so that you can look at it and kind of tell where you might need to have a little bit of shading, then that's a good way to get an idea of that. I start out with just a little bit lighter shade. It's darker than what I had, or a little different color than what I had for my original base brown. But just pick some different shades, and we'll start out with this, and then we'll go ahead and put in some darker shades as well. This just starts giving you a little bit of dimension on your project, giving a little bit more of that realistic look. All right. You don't have to do as much of that in-between color. Your darker brown is where you're really going to get your good shading. So like we have got under his chin here. So you really want to do some pretty good shading there and around the ear with your darker color. We'll put just a little bit maybe here on his chest. And we've got some right here on his leg where it kind of folds under there. So we'll get a little bit of the shading, darker shading in there. At this point, you don't have to worry about it being perfect looking. You're just trying to get some of that color in there so that when we start blending with the alcohol, you can see that you've got some nice shading. You're not going to have to worry quite as much about going in afterwards and adding more shading, although I did, when I was doing the original project, went back in just to touch up some of those areas. All right, so now you can see he's starting to get a little bit more dimensionality. Let's go ahead and put some right here where his leg kind of folds there. So now you can see he's starting to look a little bit less like he's flat. Let's go ahead and pick up our pink and go ahead and color in the interior of his ear. And just do that with a solid pink. And then we'll also color in his nose. Now I'm going to go ahead and pick back up my brown and put just a little bit of shading now down here in his ear. When we actually finish up with our project as far as the coloring and adding the alcohol in, we can go back in, like I said before, and add a few more highlights. We're just going to hit the main ones right now. Let's get a little bit up here along the top. Maybe a little bit more around his jawline. All right. And maybe just a little bit more here at the base, right close to where his tail is. Because he is sitting on the ground, so he's going to have a little bit more shadowing from where he's sitting. And then I do to just a tiny little bit just around the edge of his tail. All right, now he's looking pretty good. So let's go in with our green and just put a little bit around. And then we'll go back with our black and just kind of make a circle. Try and leave, when you're doing that, maybe just a little bit of a white space on the inside so that he looks like he's got that little reflective thing that you always see in eyes. And we'll obviously go back in and refine all of this when we start doing our pen work. Okay, so I think this is a really good way for us to start with him. Like I said, as we're going along and we feel like we need to add more color pencil, we can do that. But this is a really good start. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sweet Poppy low tack tape. And I'm going to tape this down, that just is so that it won't move around too much. And then because we'll be getting it wet, we don't want it to pull up and warp a little bit because of the dampness of the alcohol. And actually what we want to do, we can go ahead and keep this tape down, but one of the things I would like to do is, this is now where you can add your background. The background that I like to do, I didn't want, as you can kind of see in this one, I kind of wanted it to be more artsy looking, I guess you could say. I didn't want to actually color in the entire card. If you want to, you can, but I kind of like the look of it just being a little artsy looking. So let me get this finished taping down. And then I had used a blue. Let me find that blue. I really like that blue pencil. I think it was this one. It's kind of a blue-green color. Let's see, where did I put that one? Well, sorry about that. I thought I had that right here. Let's just go ahead and pull one out that we can use. I'll use this one. I think it may be a little bit lighter than what I want, but we'll start out with that. Maybe I'll use another blue as well. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go around the outside of him and just start coloring it in, just like we did with him. So you can start out by doing it the one direction, or you can scribble all around. The main point of this is that we want to make sure that we get as good and solid of a layer as we can, just like we did on him. So same process as before, so you don't have to sit here and watch me color the whole background in. I'm going to turn the camera off, but again, remember, I'm going to go one direction and then I'm going to turn and color going the other direction. Okay, so when you start doing your background, go both directions. Go coloring right to left and up to down, up and down. All right, so I will stop and then I'll show you what it looks like when we get to that point. Okay, so as you can see, now I've got the kind of the background stuff all colored in there. And again, I did that 2 or 3 layers, going this direction some, going this direction some, so that we can try and get as much layering as we possibly can on that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our alcohol ink, and I just have like a little plastic cup here, and I'm just going to pour a little bit in there. And then I'm going to take my brush, and like I said, I really like this one because I can do wide area, or if I needed to do a pointy area, but any kind of paintbrush should work fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper towel, put this over here. I'm going to dip my brush in there, and then I'm just going to dab it on there so I get a little bit off, and then I'm just going to start blending my alcohol across the color pencil. What this does is it starts kind of blending the color, smoothing it out just a little bit, and it may be kind of hard for you to see on the video part. But when you're actually working on it, you'll kind of see that the color is starting to blend just a little bit. We'll just keep doing that. Just getting that to blend together. Now, it did get a little bit dark, I think, up there, right there at the very top. So I don't know if I'll get that to be able to blend out as smoothly as I'd like to. Next time I do this technique, I may try and buy a more expensive, higher quality perhaps color pencil. This is just some that I happen to have laying around. I don't do a whole lot with color pencils, but I do every once in a while, so I haven't really invested in a really nice set of color pencils. I hope you can see now that it's kind of getting just a little bit brighter, and it looks a little bit less like pencil strokes, and maybe looks just a little bit closer to what it would look like if you used a paint on it. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the rabbit. And I don't think I've picked up a lot of ink, but or color, but I'll make sure that I don't have the blue left in my paintbrush. Looks like it's pretty clear. And now I'm just going to start on the rabbit. I'll stick to where their browns are. It doesn't matter if they're different shades of brown. It actually might be better to even go ahead and brush over all of them. That way you start getting a little bit more of a blending. But I think you can probably see here the little bit of the difference down here on the bottom versus on the top where I haven't used the alcohol. It's starting to give it just a little bit of a brighter color. And some of the actual, what looks like pencil marks, are softening up a little bit and looking a little bit more painted versus looking as pencil drawn, pencil colored. got a little too much alcohol that time. I need to be sure. Sometimes I forget to dab it off on my paper towel there to the side. Alright, so I think he's starting to get a nice little bit of punch there. Go ahead and put a little bit over the pink on the ears. And on the eye and the nose. Go down here and let it blend a little bit on his tail. Okay. So I hope you can kind of see that we're seeing less of a pencil stroke look and much more of a smoother blended area. Now if you feel like you need to add some pencil color, you can do that as well. If you want a little bit more shading, let's find a color here. We'll go ahead and do something that's a little bit darker. Let's say we want that. Now, before you color again, you do want it to be dry. So if you need to, you can just take your heat tool, dry that up just a little bit. And then go in and color. And maybe I'll even just do the, let's see, maybe the black. I'll even go ahead and go in and just add just a little bit of color in some of these deeper areas. We'll add some black so that we get some even darker shading in there. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is, just play with it a little bit. Just see what it is that you like and that appeals to you. Yeah, I like this, adding that little bit of the black in there. I think that makes us get some pop. All right, so I think what I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to go ahead and stop with the alcohol. If I need to go back in and add a little bit more, we can do that. That's not a problem. But I think I'm going to go ahead and stop that, and I'm going to go ahead and get out my black pen. And as I draw in, I think that will also help me to see if there are any areas that I need to shade a little bit more. So let's get ready to do our pen. So I'm going to go ahead and very gently remove my Sweet Poppy low-tack tape. I don't want to tear anything, but this is so good for this type of work because it won't usually tear your paper. I still always try to be as careful as I can. All right, and now I'm just going to take my pen. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this over here so we can kind of see, you can see what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm just going to start sketching in around the edge of my drawing here. And you don't even have to do it in solid. You can skip some spaces. That makes it look like it's not just like you traced it. So if you needed to skip a few areas when you're drawing, say, the hairs, you don't have to draw a line. Just kind of do some of your little hairs there. And you can go back in and touch a few spaces if you want to give it a little bit more solidity. So I'll speed this part up so that you can kind of watch along, but don't have to watch me draw the entire thing, but you can get the idea of what I'm doing. Okay, so now I've kind of got the basic sketchings down. So as you can see on this one, I've got a lot of the hairs on him. So what you want to do is then go around and sketch in the hairs, the little fine details. And then I don't know if you've ever done or seen anything where you use dots in order to help with your shading. So let's say like right here in his ear, instead of actually coloring it in solid, I'm just going to use some dots. And you can kind of see that on your stamp. They do that a lot of times. They do add dots as shading. So as you get further down, you do a few less dots, and then you do a little more intensity up where it's darker, where you're wanting the shading to really be. And so you can go in on different places and do that. And then, like I said, go in and just randomly draw some of the hairs. You can look at the stamp. That will kind of help you out with that a lot too. And then if you wanted to add just a few little lines to some of these areas that are definitely in the shadows, I'm going to go ahead and like add some dots here. And then what I will probably end up doing is going back with my black color pencil, and I'll show you that as well. Let's see where we want to have a few more. Let's get some more hairs on the back of him. And then he's got whiskers here, so we're just going to kind of wisp out some little whiskers that are just kind of fine. We don't want them necessarily to be real dark. A few up here on the top. And these literally are just tiny little dashes that I'm just kind of doing in these spots. Once again, this just gives a little bit more of a reality look. And so he's really starting to shape up and look like we want him to look. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take that black pencil and let's just add some more shadings in there. And we don't even have to go back with our alcohol because we're just going to do this very lightly to just add a little bit more depth. I actually missed one little edge for the edge of his ear right here. We'll just put that in. And then we'll darken this other part of this other ear that's just kind of barely showing there. Let's add a little bit under his chin here. So just take a look at your stamp, and you can kind of see where you might want to add just a little bit more of that dark shading. Get that foot there that's in the background. And a little bit here right around his ears. And some up around his face. So just play with it until you feel really pleased with the result that you've got. And then just to make sure it doesn't look like he's floating around, I always like to just go in, put a little bit of grass and grounding, kind of anchor him to the ground there. Maybe add a few more little sprigs here and there. Make sure we ground his back foot as well. All right, and I think I'm pretty pleased with that. So now we are ready to go ahead and put the card together. All right, so to put our card together, we're just going to take some of our running tape. Let's see, there it is, and I'm just going to mount that onto the frame, and then I'll mount it onto the card, and we will be done. If you feel like trimming it down a little bit, which I did on the first card that I made, you can do that, or I actually got this one a little more even, so I didn't really need to trim it down. This one just shows a little bit more frame than this one will. Same process over again. Mount that to our card base. And there it is. I know this video was probably a little on the longer side than I usually do, but there are a lot of steps, but it really has a nice look when you get done with it. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. This is a very interesting project to do and explores how different mediums can change the look of your picture. I hope you give it a try. Remember to check out more tutorials on the design team page at delbellosdesigns.com. Have a great day.